What's going on, guys? I'm John and this is Player Recap. This video is out much later than I'd planned because there's been a buttload of stuff to juggle both at home and at work, so I apologise for the long wait. Before I press on, I wanted to say a huge thank you for all the encouraging comments. It was a really nice surprise to see the reactions to the last video we got. I also wanted to show some gratitude to Zaki-senpai for mentioning my video. I watch his content regularly, and I'm personally really looking forward to his story summary, so thank you, Zaki. Lastly, I wanted to address the matter of accuracy. Aether Gazer's lore can be tricky to pull together because a lot of crucial details are only mentioned in passing. You have to deduce a lot, and even then there are things that look like obvious conclusions that turn out to be completely wrong. So I'll do my best to be correct, but if you smell anything fishy, please feel free to drop a comment and I'll try to draw people's attention to it. Anyway, you didn't come here to listen to an intro longer than The Lord of the Rings, so let's get going. The story kicks off with two members of Aether Gazer, the barbecue-loving optimist Verthandi and the prankster Zenkibo, exploring a subway station. Both of them have just graduated from their training, and this is their first investigation mission. There's been a quake here, so their job is to scope the place out for any Vizbanes. This also happens to be the first mission that you are in charge of. I'll simply refer to your character as the administrator from now on, as they do have their own personality within the story. They're implied to be male, especially during the glimpses of white clothing we get during the story, but this is never outright confirmed, so I'll keep their gender ambiguous. The administrator is giving orders remotely from Aether Gazer HQ alongside Balder, a member of the intelligence office, and that about sets the scene. Just as Verthandi begins to suspect that it really was just a normal quake, she and Zenkibo hear a noise. They check it out and run into Vizbanes, proving Aether Gazer's fears to be well founded. These are small fries, and so the pair wipe them out without difficulty, but as they proceed deeper into the station, they're attacked by an abnormal behemoth type Vizbane, later codenamed Hargenti. Hargenti is also no match for them. However, when it starts to lose the fight, it punches open a rift and escapes into the source layer. This creates a predicament. Most Vizbanes aren't actually strong enough to create source layer rifts by themselves. They usually wait for a stronger Vizbane to do it and then rush through. Since this behemoth happens to be just that, it will absolutely cause a disaster somewhere else if it gets away. At the same time, following after it would be dangerous for the inexperienced rookies. The source layer, as Balder puts it, is practically a Vizbane playground, and while this next bit isn't explicitly stated, it's also constantly shifting. It's easy to lose your way there. The two girls aren't afraid, however, and plead with the administrator to let them give chase. The administrator agrees, and this is partly because they've already taken precautions. They were worried that things would go wrong, and so they asked a more experienced modifier called Poseidon for her help. She's already on the way. Verthandi and Zenkibo enter the rift and fight their way past a series of Vizbanes on the other side in pursuit of the behemoth. They follow it through a number of spatial jump points called warp nodes, but it's still able to shake them off. Thankfully, with the AI assistant Mim's help, they're able to detect that there are rapidly rising levels of Bane energy in a certain direction. That's most likely where Hargenti has fled, and where they need to go. On the way there, they're ambushed by a Vizbane called an Affix Bane. This is when Poseidon catches up to the girls, and with the support of her healing powers, they kill it. The group doesn't get to celebrate though, because Hargenti seizes the moment to come back for revenge. And it's evolved. Vizbanes can actually assimilate material from the source layer to get stronger. Hargenti, who has now taken on a new form that will be codenamed Bifrons, has grown at a speed that isn't normal for most behemoths. It's already become so strong that its very existence is making the deviation rate spike. If it's left alone for much longer, it will cause another quake. It has to die here. The three modifiers work together to take it on, and after a short battle, they unleash their powers in unison to finally bring it down. It's safe to assume that the source of the quake was this abnormal Vizbane, and so the mission is considered a success. In the command room, the administrator quickly finds out that Director Shu was watching from the moment they first ran into the behemoth. She gives some words of support, and then encourages the administrators to make up their own mind about how they should see modifiers. And that's the end of the prologue. This whole chapter isn't super important. It's more of a way to throw you straight into the action, which is what most players care about, but it does give me the chance to discuss something that most players miss, and that's the relationship between Aether Gazer and an organization called the CORG Supreme Directorate. CORG is one of those groups that's introduced with no real context, and I imagine most people are curious about what exactly it is. Even if you caught up to the story, it's still shrouded in mystery and we don't know a whole lot about its inner workings. However, there are some things we do know, so I'll go over the main points. As a fair warning, there are going to be some minor spoilers, so feel free to skip to the next video in this series if you want to go in blind, but I'll be avoiding anything too specific that might affect someone's enjoyment. The CORG Supreme Directorate is the highest administrative body in Gaia. It was founded, at least ostensibly, to mitigate conflicts between the Sapphire Zones, to intervene when necessary to help human society, and to ultimately lead human civilization towards a paradise where everyone can be happy. It's even described as the leader of human civilization. That's not to say that it rules the world though, because it doesn't. Each Sapphire Zone is run by its own government, like Amorphis' Astral Council or New Hansa's president, but CORG has enormous influence everywhere all the same. It generally stays hands-off until something threatens the order of Gaia, or gets in the way of its plans, because as it happens, its upright reputation is actually a facade so well maintained that even many of its well-meaning members have no idea what goes on behind the scenes. Only CORG's higher-ups are aware of the multitude of awful secrets it's hiding, and the twisted means by which it strives to reach its goals. Just like Egregious, the CORG Supreme Directorate's leaders are aware that the world is a simulation. CORG even has its own modifiers. This isn't necessarily as strange as it sounds, as it was actually the Supreme Directorate that coordinated the transfer of humanity's minds into Gaia. They predate the simulation, and may even have had a hand in its creation. Some interesting notes in the father-son dual side story document the troubled development of Gaia. The contents of those notes is outside the scope of this topic, but they reference a government which is strongly implied to be the previous form of the Supreme Directorate. In any case, because of this unique insight, CORG recognizes the crucial role modifiers play in Gaia's survival. They've come to something of an understanding with modifier organizations like Egregious and Ein Sof, the Society of Muses and Amorphis, and so on. CORG provides support like access to conveniences such as the Photon rail, which is something I'll revisit in a moment, and in exchange, they request these modifiers' aid to eradicate Visbane outbreaks and settle some problems that would be awkward for them to act on for political reasons. It is, more or less, a mutually beneficial relationship and, I would presume, solves a lot of government-side problems these modifiers have, such as explaining why the hell they never age. In addition to a large police force, there are multiple departments at CORG's disposal. One of them, Egregious Crimes, is a lot like the FBI. While each Sapphire Zone has its own form of law enforcement, Egregious Crimes' operatives are prepared to sneak in, or kick out some teeth, anywhere, at any time. CORG has even pushed for laws that require local officers to request the Egregious Crimes Department's help when they run into bizarre incidents that defy common sense. That's because these are usually caused by Visbanes. Egregious Crimes' operatives are expected to show blind loyalty to CORG and obey orders without question. This means that while carrying out missions, they're not necessarily aware what the higher-ups are scheming. This has been proven to lead to friction with more morally upright operatives. Another department is Quake Damage Control. Most of the world believes that Visbane quakes are just normal natural disasters, and it's this division's job to make sure things stay that way. If there's a quake, Damage Control will generally cooperate with local governments to evacuate civilians before asking modifiers like Egregious Division 9 to wipe out any Visbanes. They then help with the rebuilding in the aftermath. This is the department that evacuated the subway in the Prologue. Damage Control's job also extends to concealing information in general. For example, they tweaked Ein Sof's surveillance system to automatically quarantine any footage that's suspected to have captured a Visbane. They also have the ability to wipe memories on a huge scale. This is iffy but understandable when it's in the best interest of the public, but unfortunately that's not all CORG uses it for. They've even gone as far as to tamper with the minds of an entire city to cover up certain atrocities. This method doesn't appear to work on everyone, though that hadn't stopped CORG and their proxies simply using a more direct approach, i.e. making those people disappear. There is one more department worth mentioning, and that's the Department of Photon Rail Management. In my previous video, I touched on how the Sapphire Zones are spatially isolated and how the Photon Rail is the only means to get between them, at least the only viable means we're aware of. I also left whether the Photon Rail was created by Gaia ambiguous because there wasn't enough information to tell. Well, now there is. It was man-made. The warp drive technology that the Photon Rail runs on was created long ago by a now-dead genius from Shu Hung, simply referred to as Zhu. CORG somehow got access to this and worked together with the 10 Sapphire Zones governments to build the Photon Rail's infrastructure about 150 years ago. The heart of this network, the Photon Rail Nexus, was completed in Ein Sof's core city, the same city where Egregious and CORG are currently headquartered. This is why Ein Sof is considered to be the center of Gaia. Since the Photon Rail stations are all jointly run by CORG and the local authorities of each Sapphire Zone, this gives CORG enormous control over everyone's cross-zone travel, trade, and communication. Additionally, when it comes to actually getting to use the Photon Rail, extremely strict rules have been put in place, to the point where someone who wants to travel or ship materials may have to submit their applications months in advance. This isn't necessarily for malicious reasons though. The Photon Whale is literally dangerous to use. The warp tech it relies on risks damaging everything inside it, including people. The threat of this happening was initially so high that the Photon Whale was only used for the transport of goods. CORG eventually created special passenger cars that could protect people, but due to the huge costs involved and how risky the whole thing still is, their use is just strictly controlled. It's prohibitively difficult for ordinary people to ever get from one Sapphire Zone to another. This explains why outsiders are seen as such a novelty, and why the story notes that Ein Sof, which is inhabited by people from all over Gaia, is said to be full of high-asset immigrants. In other words, many of these guys are loaded. Fortunately for modifier organizations like Egregious, their relationship with CORG means they don't have to worry too much about time or expenses. They get special treatment that lets them quickly organize trips to other zones, which is fair given that they are the main force standing in the way of Gaia's complete annihilation. So, I'll wrap things up here. To sum everything up, the prologue covers the Administrator's first mission, in which Verthandi, Zenkipo, and eventually Poseidon hunt an abnormal Visbrain through the Source Layer. When they catch up to it, they teach it a lesson it will never have the opportunity to forget. Additionally, Egregious are allies with CORG, a powerful institution with enormous influence over society, but CORG also happens to be shady as hell. Egregious isn't fully aware of just what they're up to. Whether the secrets they're hiding will come to light, and what will go down if they do, is something only the story can tell. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Because if I don't,